Right, good day everyone, and welcome to today's live lesson. As always, we're looking at bits and pieces of grammar to help you get good marks in your exams, okay? What we're going to look at today is going to be writing and punctuating dialogue. Because believe it or not, even though at your great age, some people just don't know how to punctuate dialogue even yet. Okay, and some of the writing of dialogue is kind of a dire. Okay, let's put on the share here. Writing and punctuating dialogue. You're busy writing an assignment and you want to introduce some dialogue. However, unless the dialogue is realistic and effective, it might just cause you to lose marks rather than gain marks. If you do it properly, you will get extra marks. Remember, the dialogue can act as a means of moving your story along. So you don't always have to write paragraphs and compound sentences about what's happening. Your speakers who are doing the dialogue can tell us what's happening. It's just like when you're watching a movie, there's nothing comes up to tell you what's happening. You know, maybe at the very beginning you get some titles and stuff, but other than that, everything happens mainly through what people are saying to each other, the dialogue of the movie. Right, here's a few tips on how to write dialogue. Never include greetings or small talk in dialogue. You don't want to waste words in your essay saying, hi, how's it, how are you, and all that stuff. No, that's going to be a bit boring for someone to read because that's just understood. People will say that anyway. So the point is, don't waffle. Don't waffle. Don't blah, blah, blah. Keep the dialogue short and to the point. Avoid overlong dialogue. So basically, it's on a need-to-know basis. Only write things that are important about your plot or about your character. Now, another thing to notice is instead of saying John said, Jack said, the characters should not sound the same. Each one needs his or her own unique voice. Because you don't want to be putting in he said and she said every other line. If characters have their own way of speaking, the reader should be able to guess exactly who is speaking. So you have to be consistent with the character's voice. So they address each other in a similar vein all the time. If it's consistent, it's going to be similar. Maybe there's one who always cracks a joke. Maybe there's one who's always gloomy. Maybe there's one who's always cynical. That sort of thing. Maybe there's one who's a happy chappy. Okay, but they should be the same throughout your essay. Then finally, after you've written some dialogue, what you should do is read it aloud to yourself. You know, talking to yourself used to be one of the first signs of madness, but not anymore. It's a necessity to get your work done. So, does what you've written sound natural? Does it sound real? Or does it sound fake with no emotions? It's not really the way people would actually speak. Okay? I mean, do you say to your mom, excuse me, mater, I would be so obliged if you could bring me some cake? Or do you say, Mom, I want some cake? You know, think of the difference between those two formal and informal types of speech. Okay, so that's just how to write dialogue briefly and simply. Keep the dialogue short and to the point. Characters shouldn't sound the same. They should have their own unique voice, and you must be consistent, keep it the same the whole way through. And just to check it, read the dialogue aloud to yourself, what you've written. Okay, and if it makes you bored, what do you think it makes the reader? Right, here's two basic rules about writing dialogue, which some people seem to have forgotten or never had heard of in their lives before. Every single speaker gets a new line. Don't worry about wasting paper, squashing things on one line. It doesn't work. It doesn't look good. It makes you look messy. Okay, so every time someone new speaks, it must go on a new line. Okay, even if your character is only saying one word, like yes, no, etc. So that person must get a new line. Otherwise, your dialogue is wrong. So you lose marks. Okay, and the second thing, most important thing to remember, all punctuation goes inside the speech marks. Okay, all of it. When someone is speaking, the punctuation must go inside the speech marks so the reader can understand how the dialogue is being verbalized. E.g., is it a question? Is it an exclamation? What is it? So that's one of the most important things, punctuation going inside quotation marks. So even just doing those two things, the basic rules, that's going to help you. Because sure as fate, you'll need to answer some questions with dialogue in them. Okay, so that's your little bit of knowledge for the moment. Let's just go on to looking at dialogue before we read that. You may have heard of a dialogue tag. What's a dialogue tag? It's just the way someone speaks. For example, there's your dialogue inside the speech marks. I am so thirsty. And the dialogue tag would be, she croaked. He said. She whispered. He bellowed. She screeched. He replied. She stated. He concurred. She answered. He cried. She shouted. He suggested. She disagreed. Remember, we've spoken about this before, that you need a whole list of synonyms, words that are very similar, that you can use instead of keeping on saying, he said, she said, they said. That does get a bit boring. You wouldn't like to read a book with that. Okay, so you're really looking at synonyms for said, and that's generally going to be your dialogue tag. Nothing to do with the actual dialogue itself. The dialogue is there inside the inverted commas or speech marks. Okay. Right, the reminder session now coming up, punctuating dialogue. If you've got an exclamation mark, look at the red arrows. Speech marks come before the sentence starts. Capital letter, don't do that. And we've got an exclamation mark, we close inverted commas. Punctuation is always inside the speech mark. Okay. Now we've got speech with the dialogue tag. Okay. Again, speech marks before the sentence starts. Don't do that. The punctuation inside the speech marks. Then we put the lowercase, not a capital letter. He shouted. Okay, because it's all part of one sentence. Don't do that, he shouted. So we make this lowercase. You don't put a capital letter after that. Okay, so that's with your dialogue tag. Here's your dialogue with a question mark. Are you going to do that? He asked. The speech marks again before you start, capital letter. All punctuation inside, in this case, the question mark. And again, lowercase after the dialogue, as it's all part of the one sentence. Are you going to do that? He asked. Okay. Right. Sometimes you put the dialogue tag first. And most people do this. They just said, he said, blah, blah, blah. Okay. She screamed, comma. The comma comes before the speech marks because it's not part of what was said. It's not part of the dialogue. Okay, she screamed, comma. Don't do that. Open inverted commas, capital letter, punctuation inside speech marks. Always. Okay. Now, here's some dialogue with a bit of action in between. Exciting, biting. Right, again, as usual, speech marks, capital letter. to start the sentence. This is going to be 2 sentences with some action, okay? Are you sure we should leave now? Question mark, close inverted commas. Then we've got, whoa, she closed the window to keep out the howling wind. So that's another sentence with a description. Maybe we should go tomorrow. Punctuation inside those inverted commas. So speech marks again before the new sentence, and of course closing it. So the bit of action is between 2 sentences by the same person. So are you sure we should leave now? She closed the window to keep out the howling wind. Maybe we should go tomorrow. Now some people just would have loved to write that as one big long sentence. They don't even believe in sentences, some people. So let's hope you're not like that. Now, here we've got some action or thought in the middle of a dialogue. Now, how do you punctuate that? As usual, speech marks before the sentence starts in capital letters. Are you sure? And then we close that inverted comma because we're going to use an M dash. We've got a dash that's known as an M dash. She looked daggers at him. Okay, because that there is part of the description of that person, that character you're writing about. And then she continues speaking, but it's part of the same sentence. So it has a small letter, open inverted commas again, that we should leave now. Punctuation inside those speech marks. So look at that one again, a bit of action. Are you sure that we should leave now? But because we've put in with an M dash, she looked daggers at him. That's part of the description of the person. So really, your speech continues after that. Why do we put it there? Because this helps your reader visualize the scene as you play it in your head. You've got a character in your head. You imagine what they look like. You imagine what they talk like. And you want to get it on paper to convey that message to your reader. Okay? So, and it's also good for inner thoughts, because that's very difficult to convey on paper. In the movie, it's fine. You just cut to a backflash or whatever. And there you've got it. But in writing, she looked daggers at him. What feeling does that bring about? She was not happy because she was scowling and looking daggers at him. Okay. Next part, interrupted dialogue. How do you punctuate that? Again, you use your M dash. Are you bonkers, you silly? He was going to go on and say. So you do your M dash, close the inverted commas. Don't call me bonkers. A new line, of course, capital letter. Normal sentence dialogue continues on the next line when somebody is interrupting. Okay, so as usual, all punctuation is inside the speech marks. Okay, here you've got your exclamation mark, close inverted commas. There you've got your M dash, close inverted commas there. Okay, so that's interrupted dialogue. Someone just asked a question about the M dash. It's got to be put in a kind of natural pause place in your dialogue. You can't put it in he blah 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 said, or it wouldn't make any sense. So as long as it makes sense and it looks like a good place to put it for a pause, that's where you should use it. Okay. Again, if you say this aloud to yourself, you'll see if it sounds good or sounds crazy. Okay. So you place them where you think necessary. Does this include writing to argue and persuade? Yes, it does. You can use your M dash anywhere, okay, as long as it is the best place to put it, okay, as long as it makes sense in your mind. Okay. Right. Dialogue between two sentences with the same person speaking. Your dialogue tag between two sentences. You shouldn't have started any trouble. All punctuation in there. She muttered. Lowercase first word as it's part of the first sentence. Okay. You shouldn't have started any trouble, she muttered to her husband. That's all one sentence. Then she does a new question. So again, it can stay on the same line because it's the same person speaking. I think you should just have gone home. All right. So you open the quotation marks and capital letter all inside there. Okay. So it's all reasonably logical. And then the final one, which is very seldom used unless you're writing a novel, you do get dialogue between paragraphs. And sometimes it's the same person speaking. And this is only if it's the same person speaking. You actually do not need to close your inverted commas because the same person's going on to speak in the next paragraph, but you still have to open the inverted commas, start a sentence. Let's go and visit Jane as well. Blah, blah, blah. In another sentence. Joe thought about this for a while. Okay, so that would have been paragraph 1, and that would be paragraph 2. So as I say, this is very seldom, so I doubt you'll ever use it, unless you're writing your novel and becoming a famous novelist. Okay, so briefly, you've got your dialogue tags, punctuation, always inside those speech marks, when to use small sentences, lower caps. Okay, when you're putting the dialogue tag first, when you're putting it at the end, when you're putting it in the middle, when it's between two different sentences. Okay, hopefully you managed to grasp something from there. Okay, 3 common dialogue mistakes. Yes. Do not repeat a character's name continuously. Okay, that gets very boring. You don't do it in real life. You don't say to your friend, oh, hello, John. Can you do this? John, can you please come here? John, can you please do that? Another person looking for it. So you don't do it when you're writing or it sounds unnatural. Thanks, I've got that. So the other thing, avoid repetitive dialogue tags. Use your nice vocabulary that hopefully you've been gathering up and writing for every assignment. Just lists of the vocab you might use, you may or may not. You can't keep saying, he said this, she said that, he said this. You get your long list of synonyms for the word said, okay? That shows what your character is feeling or how the plot is going, okay? And then don't keep on using the same dialogue style. In other words, don't keep putting it at the beginning. Put it at the beginning, put it in the middle, and put it at the end, particularly when you know how to punctuate it, which once you've learned it, that's it for life. It's like riding a bicycle. Once you know it, you will never forget it. Okay, so that's just 3 things not to do. Right, let's see what we're going to do now. That was the last one. Let's look at this one. How to write dialogue that is realistic and effective. It's not all fake and will go past everyone's head. So great dialogue is hard to get right. Although we speak all day, every day, some people don't listen, or they don't listen properly, they don't pick up what you're saying. Okay, but you need to use dialogue to move the plot forward and increase intrigue or mystery, which is quite difficult, but it can be done, and it saves you writing great screeds of stuff. These are the questions you should ask yourself when you read the dialogue aloud to yourself. Do people speak like this in real life? Does the dialogue move the plot forward, or does it develop the character? Can we see if he's the hero, the anti-hero? Is he gloomy? Is he sad? And do you pause in certain areas where you haven't put a comma into your dialogue? Remember, wherever there's a comma and someone's reading it, that's where they take a pause. So you can't just speak nonstop all the time, or you're going to get a whole stream of consciousness kind of speaking just like that. So you need to use commas to know where, so people know where to pause, or in this case, think as they're reading it. Okay? Number 3 and 5, same thing. Is it easy to say aloud, or does it leave you stuttering and stammering? You know, the words you're using, are they realistic? Would someone speak like that? And then sometimes you just record yourself reading the dialogue you've written on your phone or wherever, and then you can play it back and think, oh, that sounds totally crazy. That makes me sound very weird, which means, of course, that it's not realistic. Right, how do you develop a character with some dialogue? Does one character speak in short, factual sentences? Does another character wax lyrical and waffle every time he speaks, going on and on, beating around the bush and not getting to the point? This difference is actually important, so your reader can distinguish who's speaking. If you can do that, you don't need to write said John, said Jack, because the way they are speaking tells us who that person is. You can guess. Your reader is going to be intelligent, hopefully, and he will be able to guess. And that's to do with consistency. Perhaps someone always begins a sentence with or they say like all the time, like, or they say, they call the hero, yes, number 1, then we know it's the number 2 that's speaking or whatever. So they should all have some perhaps little catchphrase or something quirky that they say, and that distinguishes who your speaker is very easily for the reader. Right. Right, the character development, to make your character move forward, he's got to learn something throughout that essay that you're writing. It depends what your character's talking about as well. Maybe they're giving their view on some event that's happened or some person. And that's how also, remember, you pick up clues about things. You don't want to blatantly just say something because people get bored with that. You want them to think. You want your reader to think, gosh, I would love to read on. But if you're just going to spill everything out in front of him, your reader's not going to be that interested in going on. You know, it's totally predictable. You want to have some sort of like twists and turns in your story, making it much more interesting. Just like when you meet a new person, you can start discussing some subjects you know have in common, or perhaps some subjects or topics in the news. And that way, that's the way you can actually decide whether you like or dislike someone. And the dialogue in your writing should do the same for your characters. Are we going to like your hero? Are we going to dislike him? If you dislike him too much, nobody wants to read on, because then you don't really care what's going to happen to your character. Okay, so I'm sorry we're going through this rather quickly, but hopefully we'll get to the end yet on time. Right, and how can you improve your dialogue writing and even your assignment writing? First of all, you need to create believable characters. Okay, it's got to be a real person who's generally always got some flaw. Okay, everyone has flaws. Nobody's perfect. So you need to try and bring that in quite well. Yes, you could use, somebody's just asked me the question about debating using this sort of thing. Yes, you could. But in a debate, you'll probably have notes, but that's the way you speak that's going to help you. Okay. The next thing you need to do to improve your dialogue writing is establish a mood or a theme according to the plot. If your plot is all and setting is all in a graveyard or whatever, it's going to be gloomy, sad, weird kind of language you're going to be using. But if it's set in a beautiful garden beside a lake, it's going to be different language and vocabulary you're going to use. So when you need to convey information about the characters, don't force it into the dialogue if you don't have to. Okay, so it'll be quite fake. Rather write a sentence or two about it. And then don't let the characters tell one another things that they logically should already know. So things that have already happened on the story, you do not need to repeat them. So that's waffling. Remember the need to know basis. Yes, you can. Someone's asked me about using those words. Someone could say whatever. And other people can use like. As long as it's for character development, you can use it. Obviously, you won't use it in your descriptions or anything like that, but in an actual character speaking, that is a good thing to do because you're able to distinguish what that person is like. He likes to think before he talks, so he says, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Right, again, show rather than tell, just like we've done there. When the character acts and speaks, he becomes real. Okay? You want your character to be real. And then, of course, you build tension and drama to move the plot along. If it's all totally predictable, it's not so interesting. So trying to convey something by what someone says is an art. It means you're a good writer if you can do that for starters, but it's great for the reader as well, because they'll want to keep on reading. Now, sometimes you can reveal someone's character in what is said or what is not said. Okay? This is like men in general who seem to have a built-in deafness thing. Because you often hear your mum saying to your dad, "Oh, darling, can you wash the dishes?" And then, of course, he hears nothing. He's got selective deafness. Okay? So this could happen with your character as well. Sometimes what's not said is more powerful than what is said. Perhaps a character refuses to answer a particular question and he just runs away. He shows by the action that he's avoiding something, isn't he? So, even if he refuses to speak to another character, it implies there's something going on. But you don't have to say it out loud. We should be able to pick that up from the dialogue itself. Oh gosh, and we're just about to run out of time, people. So, yeah, and one more sentence. Avoidance intensifies tension, and it hints at the character's emotional and mental state. Okay? And to insert avoidance into your story, let your character maybe avoid an answer at some point and just do some action. He ran away looking daggers at the girl or whatever. And then finally, a strong ending could just be one line of dialogue at the end of a paragraph that you're writing. And it doesn't matter how the other character responds. You leave it to the reader's imagination to guess what's going on. Okay, as I said, sorry we had to rush that a bit, but hopefully that gives you a better insight about dialogue writing and, of course, how to punctuate it. That's where you're going to lose your marks the most. Okay, so thank you very much for joining us, and hopefully we will see you next time.